I was supposed to be a placeholder, a temporary wife paid to smile at the right moments and disappear quietly after a year. That was the plan, his plan. But what they didn't know was that I don't play by other people's rules. When his mother called me a silent leech, I simply noted the date. When his sister moved funds out of the joint account, I traced every transaction. And when he whispered to his lawyer to end it early, I had already filed the paperwork. They hired me to fake a marriage. Too bad they forgot who I really am. The Keller estate looked like a museum curated by someone who had never known restraint. Gold-trimmed columns, a staircase that curved like a question mark, and a chandelier that cost more than my childhood home. I stepped through the marble foyer, my heels muffled against the imported rug, the silence pressing in like velvet. Graham didn't hold my hand. He barely glanced my way. Vivian Keller stood at the top of the stairs, lips tight as if someone had served her spoiled champagne. "The temporary wife arrives," she said, not even pretending to whisper. I smiled. "It's nice to see you again, Vivian." She ignored that. "You'll stay in the East Wing. Keep out of the main quarters. Staff has instructions." "I'm not here to cause inconvenience. You're not here to stay." Her words were sharp, like polished glass. Graham remained silent, checking something on his phone, already drifting toward the study. That was our dynamic in public. He played the busy heir, I played the beautiful ghost. Behind closed doors, there was no performance. There was nothing. The marriage contract had been clinical from the start. I signed it not for love, not even for companionship, but for anonymity. Graham needed a wife to appear stable for a merger. I needed a legal smokescreen to finalize a personal project that couldn't afford government eyes. It was supposed to be clean, temporary, painless. But people like the Kellers didn't do clean. They did control. At dinner, Vivian addressed me only when she had to, like calling a dog. Monica, Graham's older sister, tilted her wine glass and asked if I was planning to work or just rely on the family's name for now. I said I'd be freelancing in finance. She said, "Oh, numbers," as if I'd mentioned counting pebbles. I laughed like I didn't care. Like I hadn't once brought down a multinational laundering ring with nothing but a laptop and 3 phone calls. I spent my first 3 weeks watching, observing the flow of information in the house, the way certain doors stayed locked, how Monica never left her phone unattended, how Vivian always paused before using her passcode near a reflective surface. Then I found the updated contract. It was buried in a subfolder on Graham's work tablet, something he assumed I wouldn't touch. He was wrong. I found the clause while he slept beside me, face down, the weight of entitlement still on his back. Section 9B. If the spouse, Ava Raines, fulfills all contractual obligations and remains faithful through the entirety of the 365-day term, all profit and equity derived from the merger will default to her legal ownership. The document was signed, sealed, time-stamped. That meant I wasn't just a placeholder. I was a liability. The next morning, the tone in the house changed. Monica began suggesting I visit health retreats alone. Vivian encouraged me to see a marriage counselor, someone she knew personally. Graham kissed my forehead with cold lips and told me to take more me time. That night, I embedded a micro camera inside the ruby stone of my wedding ring, a small gift to myself, courtesy of a discreet former colleague. I wanted to hear what they said when they thought I was asleep. 3 days later, I got it. Monica's voice crackled through my laptop's earpiece. Day 347. We've got 2 weeks. She signs those separation papers next week, and it's done. Vivian replied, dry and efficient. We'll tell her it's to protect her reputation. Frame it like we're being generous. If she refuses, I'll say Graham had an affair. Threaten a public scandal. She's too calculated to want that. Then came Graham's voice, soft, almost apologetic. Let's just get it over with. I'll handle the lawyer. She won't see it coming. My fingers were numb. Not from shock. Shock was too small a word. What I felt was clarity. Like a fog had lifted and everything, the rehearsed smiles, the fake toasts, the carefully staged photos, clicked into a singular, cutting image. I was supposed to disappear on day 364, erased before the contract flipped, erased before I became powerful. They thought I was a ghost. They forgot ghosts know how to haunt. I sat across from Dr. Leland in a room that smelled faintly of lemongrass and engineered empathy. The certificates on his wall were pristine, probably framed within weeks of each other. He folded his hands, offering me a look that hovered between concern and calculation. "Do you feel safe, Ava?" I blinked slowly, let my voice tremble. "Not really, I don't think they want me here." He nodded as if he hadn't already been briefed by Vivian the night before. "Let's talk about control. Do you feel like your husband respects your boundaries?" I paused, glanced at the floor like I was ashamed. "Sometimes I feel invisible." He scribbled something down. I tilted my head slightly, just enough to catch the reflection in the chrome edge of his pen. The micro lens embedded in his watch blinked once, like a wink from the devil. Vivian didn't waste time. She had recommended him before my coffee cup cooled on day 348. Subtle wasn't in her vocabulary. Surveillance under the guise of healing, that was her language. I leaned into it. Each session, I unraveled a different version of vulnerability: the uncertain wife, the paranoid outsider, the broken woman barely holding herself together. I watched as Dr. Leland's voice grew gentler, more persuasive. I let him believe I was crumbling. Then I wrote the letter. It was 3 paragraphs, meticulously handwritten on parchment, folded twice with a press of my perfume. "I tried to be enough," it began, "but the walls in this house echo with rejection. If I vanish, please remember I was someone before I became disposable." I slipped it into Vivian's reading drawer, where she always looked before her evening prayers. That night, dinner was different. Graham didn't check his phone. Monica asked me twice if I was okay. Vivian offered me wine. They thought I was slipping. I spent the next morning in the library not reading. I was watching. My fingers traced the edge of a Bible on the highest shelf, a dustless rectangle amid dust. Curious. I pulled it down. It was heavier than it looked. Inside the spine, under the binding, was a black transmitter. Small, round, military grade. I smiled. It was sending to an encrypted email address. I followed the signal to a nearby repeater, then tunneled through a VPN hosted in Argentina. It took me 6 hours and a forgotten burner laptop from my storage unit, but eventually I had it. An email address disguised as a theology forum login. I accessed the inbox using a mirrored OTP generator from a spoofed device. The latest messages weren't prayers, they were spreadsheets, transaction histories, asset logs, cryptocurrency wallet addresses, millions of dollars being shifted between shell companies, each with links back to Keller accounts, each slowly redirecting funds away from the family trust and into one private account, belonging to Monica. The pattern was genius, deliberate. Each transfer was under audit thresholds, routed through nonprofit facades, split across different chains. But I'd built algorithms to detect these kinds of trails before. She was good. I was better. I decrypted the logs, sorted them by date, flagged the ones that post-dated my marriage. Over 6.2 million had moved since I stepped foot in the estate. I began organizing the files, layering screenshots with email headers, internal Keller memos, and VPN logs tied to Monica's home IP. Every folder was time-stamped, every document labeled. At the bottom, I created a README file. This is only the beginning. I compressed the directory into an encrypted zip file and named it kellerconfession.zip. Then I uploaded a backup to 3 secure clouds under aliases I hadn't used in years. I stared at the file icon for a moment. My pulse was steady. This wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. This was preparation. When dinner came, I played the role again. I smiled when Graham touched my hand. I thanked Monica for the earrings she offered as a peace gesture. I toasted with Vivian to new beginnings. They clinked glasses. I clicked backup servers. We were all playing parts. The only difference? Mine had an ending they couldn't predict. The house was quiet at midnight, except for the low murmur of voices coming from Graham's study. I'd left the hallway lights off, my bare feet silent against the hardwood, every step rehearsed in silence. My wedding ring transmitted the audio feed directly to my earpiece. "Don't worry, Mom," Graham said, his tone casual, too casual. "Just make sure she signs the paperwork before day 364. Once that happens, everything reverts to the family trust. She's not dumb, but she trusts me." That's her blind spot. Vivian let out a dry laugh. "Then keep playing the devoted husband for another week. Once it's signed, she'll walk out with nothing. And if she doesn't, then we make her. Emotional pressure, a public story. Whatever it takes." There was a long pause. "I hate this," Graham muttered. "You love your inheritance more." Click. End call. I stood frozen at the hallway's end. The world around me didn't collapse. It crystallized. For all the lies Vivian and Monica had spun, I'd foolishly believed Graham was just passive. A coward, maybe. Not cruel, not calculated. But there it was. His voice. Calm. Practiced. Deadly. I returned to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the mattress where he had just been moments ago. My hand trembled only once as I tapped the command on my palm. The playback began. His voice, Vivian's laughter, the unmistakable betrayal encoded in every word. I listened to it twice. Then I smiled. Morning came with sunlight sharp through the windows and an unsettling quiet over breakfast. Graham kissed my cheek. I kissed his back. I dressed in ivory, smooth satin, minimal makeup, pulled hair, a vision of detachment. He thought I hadn't heard him. That was his first mistake. At noon, I placed the manila envelope on the marble kitchen counter and walked out to the garden. Graham opened it 10 minutes later. Inside were signed divorce papers. No note, no explanation, just my signature in smooth black ink. Vivian's reaction was immediate. She called her lawyer before dessert. I had beaten them to the punch. By evening, the house buzzed with celebration disguised as tension. Monica clinked glasses with Graham in the study. Vivian spoke too loudly to the staff, saying I had seen reason. They were too giddy to see the storm coming. At 7:43 p.m., my email hit 5 inboxes at once. Vivian, Monica, Graham, the Keller family lawyer, and the CEO of the company behind their biggest merger. Attached was a file, kellerconfession.zip. Inside, complete documentation of Monica's crypto laundering, transaction logs, voice recordings, visual captures from the transmitter I had pulled from the prayer book, digital trails of Vivian's offshore investments, and fraudulent tax returns. At the end of the file, a notarized claim for 51% of the Keller-Kinross merger profits, backed by the contract clause Graham had never managed to rewrite. My lawyer followed with the lawsuit documents 5 minutes later. I didn't stay to watch the chaos unfold. I walked down the long hallway, past the portraits of fake legacy, past the doors they never let me open, wearing the same ivory dress I had worn to sign the marriage agreement. Outside, the driveway was empty. I called my driver. Graham caught up to me as I reached the car. He looked like a man who had just realized the house he built was made of wax. "Ava," he said, his voice cracking. "Wait, we can talk." I turned to him slowly. "You wanted me gone before day 364, so I'm making it easy for you." His mouth opened, but I shook my head. "You underestimated the wrong ghost." I slid into the back seat and shut the door. He stood there still as the car pulled away, a statue dressed in guilt, surrounded by a kingdom already crumbling. They called me the woman who burned a dynasty with a USB stick. Catchy, if not entirely accurate. The story hit media circuits less than 48 hours after my legal team filed. I hadn't planned on going public, but someone from inside the Keller firm leaked the documents, likely someone who'd been burned by their empire. Once the files hit the net, journalists swarmed like vultures around a fresh kill. They wanted a face, a voice, a narrative. So I gave them one. I sat in a simple navy suit, no makeup, minimal lighting, across from a well-known investigative journalist. Cameras rolled. I looked straight ahead and said, "My name is Ava Raines. I was hired to play the part of a temporary wife." What they didn't know was that I've spent the last decade exposing financial predators. I just didn't expect to marry into one. The clip went viral in less than 3 hours. Millions of views, thousands of reposts, and a new wave of outrage. Vivian Keller was subpoenaed for financial misconduct, tax fraud, and illegal asset concealment. Monica was stripped of her fiduciary licenses in 2 states, pending federal investigation. Keller family PR spun stories of forged evidence and a bitter ex-wife. But the digital trail was undeniable. Every transaction I exposed had time-stamped blockchain verification, immutable, unforgiving. And Graham? He vanished. I didn't chase. I was busy building something better. With the funds recovered from frozen Keller wallets, I launched Ava Inc., a nonprofit initiative focused on financial defense for women trapped in abusive economic relationships. Our software tools helped victims identify hidden accounts, track illegal transfers, and encrypt communication with legal advisors. Within the first month, we stopped 3 eviction attempts and overturned 2 asset-freezing cases. The second month, we went global. People asked how I funded it. I told them the truth, from ghosts of men who tried to erase me. For the first time in years, I felt purpose. Not revenge, but impact. Not silence, but movement. The press tried to paint me as a vigilante or a symbol, depending on the headline. I ignored both. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who'd survived a system designed to devour women whole and walked away with the blueprint. Then came the invitation, an international investment summit in Berlin, exclusive, invite only. I was surprised to see my name on the list, even more surprised to see Ava Inc. listed as a keynote partner. We weren't even a year old. Someone was paying attention. I arrived in a tailored gray suit, no jewelry but my old wedding ring, its camera now long inactive, its meaning still sharp. The summit was a glass and steel temple of global finance, suits, translators, and polished egos. And then I saw him. Graham stood near the edge of the conference floor, dressed in muted tones, holding a folder against his chest like a shield. His hair was shorter, his jaw thinner. The name tag read, Strategic Liaison, Delmara Holdings, a competitor, a rival firm that once tried to poach Keller executives. Now they had poached something else. He looked up, our eyes met. For a second, time folded inward. Then he walked over. "Ava," he said, voice softer than I remembered. "You look powerful." I tilted my head. "You look employed." He winced at that. "I didn't expect to see you here." "No," I said. "You expected me to disappear, like the rest of them." "I wasn't." He hesitated, searched for a word. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." "But you did." His mouth opened, but nothing came. "I wanted to reach out," he finally said, "to explain, to apologize." I nodded slowly, let the silence stretch. Then I stepped closer. "I'm not angry," I whispered. "I'm grateful." He blinked. "You taught me something valuable, Graham. You taught me how to love myself without needing permission. You taught me that betrayal doesn't have to destroy. It can define." I smiled just enough to make him wonder what else I knew. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. Then I turned away. Behind me, the murmurs resumed. Executives returned to networking. Journalists returned to their notes. And Graham stood alone in a room full of power brokers, the air around him heavy with pity and consequence. I didn't look back. That chapter was already closed. Victory doesn't echo in marble halls. It whispers in empty rooms. My apartment was high above the city, walls of glass and polished steel. A minimalist's dream, curated to reflect success. There were no personal photos, no furniture with history, just clean surfaces and curated silence. At night, I scrolled through articles bearing my name. The woman who won. Ava Rain's Digital Phoenix. There were podcasts dissecting my strategy, reaction videos praising my poise. People adored the myth they made of me, but the woman behind it sat alone, wine untouched, answering no calls. Sometimes I opened Ava Inc.'s dashboard to see our latest numbers. Women helped, cases won, assets returned. I smiled, but it never reached my chest. I had built an empire from ash, but what remained was hollow. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope addressed in shaky handwriting. A hospital in Connecticut. Vivian Keller, terminal, stage 4, refusing care unless I came. I stared at it for a full minute, heart flat. There was no anger, no pity, only a flicker of something colder. Detachment disguised as composure. I booked the ticket the next day. She was thinner, smaller than I remembered. Her skin was translucent, her breath shallow. Still, she wore a silk robe and a single pearl earring, as if vanity could still anchor her to life. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she croaked. "I wasn't sure either," I said. She chuckled, then coughed. "You've become powerful. You've become alone." Her eyes flickered. "No one else came." "I know." There was a long silence between us. She looked past me as if seeing through walls. "You're not here to forgive me," she said. "No." She closed her eyes. "Then why?" "Because once you said I was temporary, just a placeholder wife, someone easy to replace." She opened her eyes again. I leaned forward, voice steady. "Well, now, you temporarily need me." I stayed for an hour. I didn't hold her hand. I didn't promise to return. But I listened. Once. She told me about her first miscarriage, about the pressure of marrying into power, about the fear of being forgotten. When I stood to leave, she said, "You were never meant to survive us." I paused at the door. "I didn't. I surpassed you." The next day, I signed the dissolution papers for Ava Inc. We had saved who we could. It was time for others to lead. I transferred full ownership to a board of women who had once stood where I stood, broke, silenced, erased. Now they would carry the work forward. My face, my name would vanish from the brand. No more interviews, no more conferences, no more Ava. A week later, I saw Graham's name trending. He'd written a book, The Temporary Wife, How One Woman Redefined Power. My face was on the cover. Inside were stories he had no right to tell, details I had never shared. It was part memoir, part love letter, part redemption arc. He framed me as a symbol, wrapped his guilt in polished prose, and sold it to the world. He didn't ask permission. He knew I wouldn't give it. I didn't sue. I didn't respond. I didn't send a cease and desist. Instead, I disappeared. No more speeches. No more social media. I shut down all my accounts, rerouted all contact through legal proxies. I ghosted the world I'd once dominated, and somehow that made me bigger. People speculated endlessly. Where is Ava Raines now? They turned me into a legend, a cautionary tale, a feminist icon, a digital saint. The more silent I became, the louder their fascination grew. But I wasn't watching. I was gone. The island had no paved roads, only red dirt paths winding between sugar palms and salt-crusted huts. The sea whispered to the shore in the early mornings, and the evenings smelled of wood smoke and ripe mango. I lived in a cottage with no mirrors and a radio that only played static. It had been 3 years. 3 years since I deleted every trace of Ava Raines from the surface web. 3 years since I handed over Ava Inc. and walked away from headlines, legacy, vengeance, and all their empty applause. I taught now, quietly, consistently, in a village school where the blackboard was still chalk and the desks were too small for the children growing into them. I taught them numbers first, then code, then truth. One afternoon, after a lesson on online safety, a girl named Lanny tugged at the hem of my blouse. Her eyes were wide, serious. "Miss Ava, were you ever rich?" The question didn't surprise me. They knew I was different. My accent, my quiet, the laptop I never let anyone else touch. I crouched down beside her. I had everything, I said softly. Then I let it go. Why? Because it wasn't real, not the way this is. I touched her wrist where she wore a bracelet made from dried shells and thread. She looked at me for a moment longer, then nodded, as if accepting something sacred. At night, I wrote lesson plans and cataloged old stories. I read about monarchs and mathematicians, about systems that broke and those who rebuilt them. My hands no longer shook. My dreams were no longer haunted, until they came. It was a Wednesday when the Jeep rolled into the village. Not a tourist Jeep. This one was clean, official, humming with electric silence. A woman stepped out, well-dressed but sweating through her blouse. She asked for me by name, not Miss Ava, not teacher, the full name. Ava Raines, she said, holding out a card with a logo I hadn't seen in years, a phoenix etched in purple. I didn't take it. "We've been looking for you," she continued, tone gentle. "There's a summit, Global Coalition of Women-Led Initiatives. Your name still carries weight." I gave that weight away. Yes, but it still pulls. I looked past her, toward the schoolhouse, where laughter spilled through the windows. "Why me?" "Because you changed everything." I smiled faintly. "No, I just started the fire. Others carried it. We want your voice. I want my silence." She blinked, unsure of how to respond. I pointed to the Jeep. "You'll want to take that back before high tide. The road floods." She hesitated, then nodded and left the card on the windowsill. I didn't touch it. That night, I used it as a bookmark for a child's copy of The Little Prince. The summit came and went without me. Still, the questions continued. Letters began arriving, not from governments or corporations, but from women, survivors, students, daughters of women I'd once helped. They sent photos of courtroom victories, screenshots of unsealed accounts, poems written in 3 languages. Some asked for advice. Others just wanted to say thank you. I answered none of them. I read every one. My final class before the new year was under the banyan tree. We spoke about legacy, about what we leave behind. I didn't mention lawsuits or contracts or crypto wallets. I spoke of kindness, of refusal, of disappearing when it's the only way to stay whole. A boy asked me if I'd ever go back. To the city? To the news? I shook my head. "That was someone else," I said. "She did what she had to. I'm not her anymore." They nodded, accepting. As the sun set, painting the sea in gold, I sat on the steps of the schoolhouse and watched the tide creep forward. The card was still there on the windowsill, now faded and curled. I finally picked it up. Not to respond, just to let it go. The wind took it a moment later, and in that moment I smiled, not because I'd won or escaped or even survived, but because I was free. I don't need fame. I need peace, and that is something they could never take away.